Hi everyone. Today we have a special guest, so every guest is a special. Tobias Augspurger, aerospace engineer, climate activist, and open source advocate. Also founder of OpenSustain.tech, an open platform for free and open climate technology. He also pioneered the application of open source in the German automotive industry within the DHL Group as a head of software development for autonomous driving, and worked for over 13 years in different remote sensing applications and loves to innovate based on open source practices. And today we will be mainly talking about MapYourGrid project and open sustainability principles. I'm very much honored to have you here, Tobias. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nas, for having me.
So can you introduce yourself to the broader audience?
Yeah, so my name is Tobias Augspurger. I'm living in Aachen, Germany, next to the border to Netherlands and Belgium. I have two little children. I'm working for open energy transition at the moment. I'm the lead of electrical grid mapping there. Open Energy Transition is a non-profit startup from Germany that is using open source and open data for a lot of energy transition use cases where software can be relevant, mostly energy planning, energy studies, how to get to net zero is our goal, yes.
Yeah, so I got in touch with you after I've seen your work. Very amazing, actually. So can you talk about more? So what is MapYourGrid, and can you give us a backstory of this project? How this project started?
It was so it. So 17 years ago, I started really early, the OpenStreetMap community decided that they allow power infrastructure mapping in OpenStreetMap. And this was something very unique because no other map service really has dedicated support for mapping power infrastructure. And then people all around the world started mapping. And it was at the beginning, let's say, very small lines here and there, here a substation, here power plant. But over the last, I would say, 5 years, this really took off. And today, OpenStreetMap is actually the best and most used data source for transmission grid information all around the world. So it's also the only source where you can really get some transmission grid data for every country. And then a lot of people was, let's say, not really thinking about the potential of that. But there was a project called Pipes to Earth that's actually an energy system model. And there were other, let's say, open source energy system models that are used to do studies all around the electrical grid or around actually power infrastructure in a country in general, and also to do forecasts in which sector do we need to invest, where to build your solar power, where to build your wind turbines. And they used OpenStreetMap because this enabled them to do independent studies all around the world. And Pipes Are Earth, or Pipes Are Meets Earth, the community behind also some of our funders of Open Energy Transition, they were really successful with that to really providing actually energy system studies for every country around the world. And then there was a study made actually last year by Bobby Singh, I think, yes, is his name. And then he was published in Nature, and he proved that actually the data of system operators all across Europe create the same results or very similar results as if you would use OpenStreetMap data. So the data in OpenStreetMap has a similar quality than the data of the system operators. And this triggered, let's say, or allowed us to get funding of Breakthrough Energy to create MapYourGrid in this year. And this is really an organization, or let's say it's actually an open source community that wants to support these mappers in OpenStreetMap, to give them the best tools they can get. We guess at the moment we are at a coverage of 70% worldwide of the transmission grid, something between 70 and 80%. It's hard to guess actually the total size of the electrical transmission grid worldwide, but this is roughly where we are, and we want to, let's say, empower this community to go to the last hard 20 to 30%. So we create a lot of tooling to fill the gaps. That is what we really do, because a lot of transmission lines, so the mappers normally work in a, let's say, very smaller region, and transmission line always go through whole country. So we sometimes have some gaps in between, and we identify these gaps, we close these gaps, we find errors, we do a lot of validation, a lot of improving this data to make it a global GIS standard or for the transmission grid. And we do this with satellite imagery. So a lot of people think that we just copy pasting together some data here and there, and this is not allowed in OpenStreetMap. What we really do is we look at satellite imagery, and then this gets manually mapped. There's a lot of, let's say, other data sets involved and AI and such stuff, but at the end, you need one human at the end to really decide this goes into OpenStreetMap, because OpenStreetMap is like a ground truth data set. So we're focusing at the moment mostly on low to middle income countries. We've done significant work in Africa and Latin America and Asia. And we really, because this data is also used, for example, a lot by World Bank, a lot of for-profit companies, a lot of, but especially also in academia and science. What we also see is more and more utility companies who are really interested in the data, because it enables them to have another way to validate their data, to improve actually their own data. We've seen in France, we see this also in Latin America, that OpenStreetMap helps sometimes these companies or these organizations to improve their own internal data set on the electrical grid. So, that's, I would say, or let's maybe about the organization. It's really a combination of a lot of smaller French companies, three French companies. We have one from Great Britain involved now, and they all have some experience already with power grid mapping. For example, we collaborating with Ross Garrett, who is actually the leader of the Open Infrastructure Map.org. That's actually the visualization of all this data. If you want to have a pretty visualization on the globe of all the electrical grid data, you would go to openinframap.org. And this is where you can see the amount of data that is already there.
Mm-hmm. What I also loved, because before preparing for this episode, I like the main concept, because usually as a PhD researcher, perhaps we lack data and we conclude most of the research that we need to collect more data. Meanwhile, it could be also a main excuse, but I mean, for me, it seems that we have more than enough data at the moment, and you are one of the persons who are making use of this openly accessible data.
So yeah, it's what we do. Yeah, we collect a lot of like, let's say, open data sets, and we harmonize them into one bigger data set back. Because a lot of scientists, they create some new data for this region, and then for this region, it's in smaller repositories here and there.
Yeah.
Even with OpenStreetMap, people are downloading the data, extending, improving the data, but they don't feed it back. It's a little bit a problem. But this is what we also do. Yeah, we take this data, we put it into our OpenStreetMap editor, then we validate if we actually can see what is being actually what the data says. If we can see, is there a substation? Is there actually a transmission line where the data says is a transmission line? And if yes, then we map it back into OpenStreetMap.
Yeah. I also it's very much known that developing countries lack a lot of the dataset collection. So it seems that you are mainly focusing in Africa as well. I've noticed that you have even my country, Kazakhstan. So yeah, that's great job. I guess we will talk about it later on more in detail. And also, initiated by Open Energy Transition and 4 partners, data activist Dinarcio, Jungle Bus, and Infogeomatics. It's aimed within a year to develop not only the community tools, but also the data coverage of several countries of the world on all continents. Can you? It's very ambitious. So can you reflect on this ambitious goal?
Yeah, we want to, let's say, be finished in 2028 with the coverage worldwide, to have 98% more or less of transmission lines worldwide. It's ambitious, yes. It will also include quality control. We did a lot of validation and quality assessment around the data. So this, we want to achieve, it's a little bit, it sounds always that we want to do that. We want to empower the existing community to do it. To give you an idea, for example, what we contributed to OpenStreetMap is the growth of data just in China that the community provided to OpenStreetMap. That means the community contribution is still, 3 to 4 times bigger than actually what we did manually in OpenStreetMap. So most of the contribution is really just of voluntary people who like to map, they like geographic data, and they do this for free time. And are the people we want to empower, because we've seen that the tooling they use is not that good. And we want to help them to double check and to train them and to, let's say, have better good practices. And so we want to empower the existing community, especially the local community we are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
To have really local communities who care. That's the idea about OpenStreetMap, that the local communities take care of their local data on the long term. Because after we reached this goal, it's expected that the transmission grid will double until 2050. So these communities need to continue their work. They need to maintain the data, improve what changed. And we don't want to replace the community in doing that.
Mm-hmm. So how do you get local community get involved in this initiative?
Yeah, that's a good question. We try to go to the conferences there are the state of the map conferences in different regions, Asia, Latin America, US, Africa. This is one way to get engaged. Then we go into the OpenStreetMap forums and ask people to, let's say, get in touch with us. So a lot of communities reach out to us. For example, from Canada, from Myanmar, from Brazil, they reached out to us. How can we support you? And we want to build a local, let's say, a little bit more of a local capacity there to really, let's say, do this. And what we normally tell those people is also to get in touch with the local OpenStreetMap community. Like this is normally what we do. We would train them, we would give them a capacity to do this, but also to always get engaged with the local community. And so to also, let's say, more distribute the knowledge around how grid mapping can be done. Yeah, that's more or less how it goes. We also now partner with an organization called the Youth Mappers from the US, and they are they really just already have a significant network to universities, and so yeah, what we really do is to partner with other existing networks.
Yeah. To be honest, I have seen. I believe it was an open science days in our university where you could visit a lot of workshops organized by my university, Ghent University, and there was a similar initiative where you need to map the buildings. So yeah, I still have the brochure, and I aimed to do it one time. I'm still postponing it, but yeah, I see that it contributes a lot to open science and accessible data as well. So I guess that's a good thing for all of us, because if we as individuals during our free times could contribute to generate more data, so why not?
Yes, definitely. It's like OpenStreetMap creates a significant amount of value for infrastructure in general. If it's about roads, transmission grid, but there's also disaster response is like a huge thing where volunteers are strong now on OpenStreetMap. And the good thing about OpenStreetMap is it's very decentralized. Like there's not a lot of, let's say, bigger organization controlling this. It's a really great way to also make sure that your data survives and will be maintained and is part of a bigger data set, instead of creating smaller data that then just get lost over time. This is what really OpenStreetMap has created in a great way, how to maintain your data for decades.
Mhm. I guess we'll talk about it later more in detail. So I want to more focus on your efforts. Open access data. You have contributed a lot, and I believe that you are one of the advocates in this area. So you believe openness is a key indicator of sustainability. Can you elaborate?
Yes, this was something we done in the Open Sustainable Technology Project, or just OpenSustain.tech, how we call it. We just did, let's say, an index of open source projects of let's say a certain qualities worldwide for 5 years. It was a purely volunteer work, almost no funding. But we also did some advocacy around the idea and the mindsets that we could find already in a lot of those projects. Because to my own surprise, there was not that much really focused advocacy around why open source and open data and open science and openness in general is so important for sustainability. But I can try to explain it in a short way. It's more or less, if you talk about sustainability, we talk about the future. How does what you do affect the future? So what you do now and the decision you make now affect the future? To look into the future, no one can look into the future. What you can do is, that's the problem with sustainability, right? So no one, and that's why sometimes a lot of the sustainability decisions, you can always say, but who can look into the future? So what is sustainable? But thanks God there's science, and science enables you to use math to do prediction for the future. So we know how our world works. We know how the physics of our atmosphere, of our cryosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, we know there are a lot of math. And so you can predict in a certain way, like you can predict that your airplane doesn't crash, right? You know that your airplane doesn't crash. You trust science. But a lot of people don't trust climate science, but they still enter an aircraft. It's a little bit, for me, sometimes confusing, but at the end, it's if you can prove your forecasts for sustainability or why something is sustainability with open data and open source, you can get into a conversation about why you have considered this sustainable. And this doesn't mean that what you are proposing or what you forecast is actually sustainable, but it enables you to go into a conversation, and in this way you prove that you have sustainable intentions. And that's let's say, the core idea, that by making your assumptions, your model, your data accessible, open, to make it verifiable by someone else, you prove you have sustainable intentions. And it's a very simple methodology, actually, and it works very well. If you go out there, just look into the technologies that are false promises for sustainability, like, for example, carbon offsets or a lot of carbon capture technologies, and you will find that you will not get any data there. You will not get any models there. You just get a lot of, maybe some papers, maybe nice plots, but let's say the math and the methodologies and how this is being created is very hidden. And the more data and more models and more software you find to a technology, and a sustainable technology, at least a technology that you consider sustainable, the more sustainable it is actually sometimes. And that's a very interesting, just an idea that came up within our community. And we do know advocacy where we can find time around this to just say, if you say this is sustainable, then show me your math, show me your model, show me your data, and we can have a conversation. If you don't show me, I just don't trust you. Go away with your biofuel. It is really like that. And we investigated a little bit inside of the project. We create now another actually smaller paper. And it's really interesting. For example, it's about sustainable investment. So if you go to your bank and you want your private money to invest sustainable, you will find out they cannot prove anyhow with science that what they propose to you is actually sustainable at all. And we said this 4 years ago, and then there was this big greenwashing problem also disclosed by a lot of newspapers that said, a lot of these sustainable investments are actually not sustainable. And I was like, for sure, they're not sustainable because you cannot do you have any math, any data, no models around why this investment is actually considered sustainable? And it's really like something I'm still doing sometimes talks about, and everyone is always agrees with me, yeah, but it never took actually off. Like the whole idea about open sustainability, or we sometimes also call it traceable sustainability, is still, you know,
Yeah. I actually completely understand, and I think you are raising the right question, or like the discussion, because basically we have a pressing time at the moment with the climate change. We have urgency, and I completely agree. Yes, we have this a lot of papers being published. We have this a lot of conferences being organized. But when yes, this is also one of the founder of, for example, oh, I forgot the name of the company. Anyways, so if you see the code of the person, or if you see the data of the person, that they are showing, you can say, okay, this is legit. I trust you. Okay, makes sense. And then you move on, you make the conclusion. So
yeah,
what you are saying is, as long as we can look at each other's data, as long as we can see each other's codes or the model that we are proposing, that it's open access, and it's gives kind of as timing, that we don't have to waste our time exposing or trying to prove that this is legit or if this really works, right?
yes, that's the point. It's really just about trust at the end.
Yeah.
And we have in sustainability, there were so many people who tried to use the sustainability movement to steer it for political reasons or economical reasons, certain directions. But none of them could really prove what they're saying. Like, you could also ask the question very easily, if there's no climate change, show me an open source model with open source data that disproves climate change. You will not find it. Why do you not find it? Like, because it's really about trust, and an easy way to see, can you trust something, is the amount of openness. Yeah.
Yeah. I do understand that sometimes there could be certain reasons, or because of the I don't know, privatization, that some people want to
Yeah.
the data inaccessible. That could be explained, of course, but if their software is working in real world, it means that the service is being provided. That's a different case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With everything, there's limitations. Even with openness, if you bring it to the extreme, it will be not good. For example, just if it's about climate, they demand data of your smart meter, of every smart meter. Would be interesting, to have all this data open, but it would be a privacy nightmare to have this data for everyone accessible, open. The same thing goes also for some, let's say, data around the grid, actually. There is sensitive data that should not be shared. But I think we see, especially when it comes to the fossil fuel industry, that we have not really looked into how more openness and open science, and to also enforcing this to certain industries, is something I think could be very interesting, could help us. I have done actually a PhD in atmospheric physics, and I had a lot of conversations with people that just don't know actually the emissions of different industries, because the emissions, they are measured by the industry, but no industry does it share with the scientists. So they really, even if they use Earth observation to measure the emissions, they have no data set to validate what they're doing. So they are always moving blind. So there's a lot of other areas where let's say, data quality. For example, when it was about carbon offsets with reforestation, and there was huge amount of bad data out there that was created with proprietary software, closed source software, and people were just selling carbon offsets that did not exist because the data quality was so bad. But I must also say, I'm doing this now for 5 years, and let's say there's advocacy work for open source and sustainability. And I have sometimes the feeling that even a lot of sustainability people don't understand the value that comes with openness. I really think that there needs to be more really transformation actually of this movement towards more open practices.
Yeah, I completely agree because, as you said, we cannot predict. We can make a lot of assumptions, guesstimations, predict the future, but if we take care of our own action now and try to make a change at the moment and really balance, we can really actually make the future better for the next generation. And this is the work that we are doing, like sharing, being open. And in this sense, actually, I also admire that European Union is doing a lot of effort. EU Horizon projects, for example, they always require that you make your publications accessible, open access. It must be open access.
Yeah.
So that's good. As well, as you said, of course, for privatized industry, it's something different because, it's a complete different story with the industries.
That's true. That's true. But the fossil fuel industry gets a lot of public money. So why should we not ask them to be also giving us some of their data? It doesn't cost them a lot. It would just make better science possible and would make them accountable. And this is something that is a little bit missing at the moment. I feel sometimes that citizens are getting more and more completely transparent, but a lot of industries, it goes into completely different direction. And so it's good that the European Union is pushing for that. They have also noticed this Green Claim Act that is now should come, but this was now being stopped, unfortunately. They also understood and wanted to actually have some policy that enforces that when you do sustainability claims on a product level, if you have some claims on your product that they are sustainable, that you at least should have some signs why you claim that. And if you when you see that there's such a policy coming, you know actually how it goes in the industry at the moment. So there's a lot of green claims, and open science can help us get rid of that.
Yeah. I guess we can talk about it much more. I mean, there are also it's quite dynamic system where we have to consider a lot of factors because the society we're quite complex functioning, and it also requires, of course, the main factor influencing is politics, where it gets a little bit messy, out of hand,
Yeah.
So yeah, but I guess just discussing it, bringing it into discussion is already somewhat important. But also, thank you for taking an effort to, make being an advocate in open science. So I think that's already a big step. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really. This is my dream. I really can do here what I really enjoy. That's why.
Yeah. Coming back to MapYourGrid, you briefly mentioned the importance of local community, and
Yeah.
how they could be involved. So could you briefly again mention how this MapYourGrid functions, the brief structure, and also the importance of, again, local community support, how they can get involved? Yeah.
So it works like this. You have the MapYourGrid website that gives you just, at the first page, we have an impact page. That's normally just where is this data used, why it's important. This is just to give you an understanding why this data matters. And then we have, let's say, a huge page for different starter kits. Let's say easy to begin with starter kits that are where you can map actually your first transmission line in 10 minutes. We tried to create a very easy and hope fun experience with that. And then there are, let's say, more advanced starter kits for more advanced tools, but also for field mappers. So if you, let's say, want to go, for example, into your region with a mobile phone and you want to map something on the way, there we have, let's say, tutorials and things how to do it. And we have the Map It page. And this page actually enables you to load the right data into your editor. And then some other hint layers, to call it, that are really just significantly accelerating your mapping experience. So you can map on a national level, state level, province level. You get all the grid data. You have a nice visualization. You get different hint layers. For example, one hint layer is, for example, Wikipedia articles. So sometimes Wikipedia articles have coordinates. And it's really important to combine such different open data sets and to help in this way. We use these open data sets to not actually add them to OpenStreetMap. What we normally do is to use it as a hint. Where is this? And then if you see it in the satellite image, you can map it. A lot of guidelines, work a lot on guidelines, tutorial videos, a lot of videos there. And then comes the tooling and the strategies. And this is really just, if you want to map the electrical grid, there's not, one perfect strategy to do it. There's also not just AI solving all this problem. That's another conversation. But AI helps a lot there in different ways. But it's just actually it's a sum of a lot of strategies. So you apply around 20 different strategies, and you can be sure that you get the right data, that you increase the coverage at first, so that you have all the lines, all the substations, and then there's different methods how to do it. And then you go into a technical mapping phase where you would validate this data, you check it for attributes, you check the connections, and there you need some grid expertise to do this. But to do this pioneer mapping, that we call it, the first stage, this is where most work also is needed. There everyone can really contribute very easily. And we have also some progress pages where you can see how much has been mapped. And that's the website. So it's but there's also, and this is important to say, there's also for every country a country page in the OpenStreetMap Wikipedia, where you can see these are the people mapping in this country, the transmission power grid. These are the standards used. This is the data sets available. These are the voltages. So there's also for every individual country a landing page, but this is also document described in our tutorials. Yes. So this is more or less MapYourGrid. So it's about tooling. And then there will be now coming a validation platform. So we have actually already, this is just done, is to have the data quality for every country. This is what we will have finished until the end of the year. We have the first prototype done, so that mappers know, okay, and also the data users know, this data is really good, and here we need to work on.
Yeah, I also want to note that I really liked before preparing for this episode, I also watched one of your recent interviews, and what I really liked your response that because people want to bring up AI all the time, and we still need people to double check the data. We still need people who would work with this data. Because recently I was just watching Silicon Valley TV series, and there the AI deletes all the data of the company that they have been collecting for years.
Yeah.
So it's AI is just very good at doing specific tasks. It's just a black box, but I mean, it tries to back propagation. It tries to diminish the punishment, so therefore it tries to learn more, but it doesn't know what it is looking for as long as you don't direct it. So therefore, I really like that you highlighted the importance of why humans touch is still needed there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is, and we use sometimes some AI-generated data sets. For example, for solar, let's say data sets for solar power plants all around the world, created with Sentinel-2. And yeah, you always have, I don't know, depending on the country, 10 to 20% false positives. And then also the polygon is not correct. And yes, you can create a lot of data with AI, but at the end, you have to ask yourself, what is the ground truth data we all agree at the end?
Mm-hmm.
So, and in times of AI, everyone can create a huge amount of data. So how do you trust which quality? What's the better data? And it's also, all our data is actually used for AI training.
Yeah.
And because it's manually created and validated, the people who are doing AI training trust the OpenStreetMap data because they know it's human validated. Every data point in OpenStreetMap, that's important to understand. OpenStreetMap doesn't work as your data lake. We're not allowed to import data. Data is manually created. You click it in the editor. You would use AI to suggest how things can look, but you always have to, at the end, a manual person who validates it, and at the same time he validates it, and then it gets uploaded to OpenStreetMap. And you have the verification of a lot of community members who looked at it and curated it over years. And this creates a very good, and I must say, even for me, sometimes very surprisingly good data quality. Like it's this iterative approach on data is really creating high quality data. It's and AI cannot do this. And also AI has no context. So for example, if I find a power plant, I find a substation, I know here goes the line. I know I sometimes then see other things that are not mapped along the line. I see, there is, for example, as another power plant, there's some solar rooftop. There is some, so mapping is really a whole story. And what I also found super interesting is if you always use AI, you don't have any experts anymore. So because I do the mapping, sometimes I get an expert for this grid actually I'm mapping for. So there come people to me and ask me questions about the grid. So I can tell them this because I have this actually hands-on experience with working with this data and looking into it. So
yeah. But I also like that you mentioned, the quality of the data, because we should not forget AI trash in, trash out. if it's trained in a bad data, then it will also generate bad results. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the huge issue I see with AI in the future. There's a lot of false promises that a lot of about AI is actually not about the methodology, but the data you can use. And most of the good open data sets that were of high quality, like Wikipedia, OpenStreetMap also used a lot for AI training, or GitHub, they're all being used now. And one problem, why should I now create much more open data for actually a product, for profit product that, and the other thing is, when a lot of data is now let's say, combined with synthetic data, how it could call it, that is not being human created anymore, what will happen then? Most likely the AI quality will drop. So that's why data curation is so interesting.
You have mentioned a little bit before, but again, perhaps you can explain more broadly. In your view, so we map these grids and everything, and we have this output data. And can you now talk about this, the value of this open source when it comes to mapping energy infrastructure per countries or globally?
Yeah. Okay, so the data is being used for, let's say, mostly at the moment for example, World Bank. They use it a lot for their a lot of different tools and models they are creating. Mostly it's about energy access, is a huge topic, but also about investment. So one problem with low to middle income countries is sometimes, if you don't know where the grid goes, and if you have actually no open data in general, or no data, you don't know where to invest. So for investors, it's always good to have traceable data that can have that is verifiable to a certain extent. And this is, OpenStreetMap is verifiable completely. And this makes it very attractive for investors, not just in the energy sector, but in general, for building, I don't know, an industrial facility. Then huge value comes also for this data for actually the for-profit. A lot of for-profits we see. They use it. I know of a lot of for-profits. They use it for actually proprietary software to do planning services. Where do I build your solar park? Where do I build my wind turbine? Where is enough capacity here and there? This is where this data is being used a lot. The data is also now, and then let's say academia a lot. Disaster response is a huge topic. Disaster resilience is a huge topic for the grid, to harden infrastructure for heavy weather, especially around the equator. There's a lot of heavy weather that is been coming with climate change, and it's important in your planning to consider this. So another thing is to do planning in the grid. We see this in Africa, then this is also being used many times. But where it's also interesting is, and this is what we also want to go now, is for system operators and utilities. They have, let's say, proprietary internal data sets, closed data sets about their grid, how the grid actually, the topological design attributes, any data around their grid. And the only data set that they can actually compare with and validate their own data is actually OpenStreetMap. So we are investigating also if, let's say, we can find problems in their internal data set with OpenStreetMap. And Then it's also a matter of policy making. This is also important. Let's say a lot of studies around policy making use also OpenStreetMap. Then, yeah, the use cases are, but then also it's about really to model energy access. What is the distance of a community to the grid?
Yeah.
And
I also would like to mention to the listeners that actually the energy has a direct link to climate change, because we are using energy everywhere. That's the driving force of actually the climate change.
yeah, maybe we should, let's say, explain the connection between the grid and climate. That's like a good point that for listeners. So the main bottleneck in using, but also in building renewable energy is actually electrical grid. This is one of the main bottlenecks. So a lot of energy is actually wasted and getting unused because the grid is not, let's say, at the moment designed for that kind of energy transition that is going on at the moment. And also, I think it's about when, for example, you would have a lot of solar power in this region, and you need to trade it, you want to transfer it to the other regions. And this is where you really need a good transmission grid. And the data around the transmission grid helps to understand what is actually the existing grid. And it's also about where this data is also coming very used a lot is when it's about if you want to do regional studies, if you want to do cross-border studies, the grid in many regions gets now so interconnected that you need, let's say, data sets that can go across different countries and regions to do certain studies. No, we need to build an interconnector from this region to this region, or from this country to this country, to enable better share of renewables, that we can trade energy between those countries or regions.
Yeah. I believe that there are also direct implication in research, which you briefly mentioned, and also urban planning, as you also briefly mentioned. Yeah. And so you talked about the opportunities. Now let's come back to the challenges. So what are the main challenges in mapping for MapYourGrid, and what future directions are unfolding?
The main challenge we see is just people don't trust the data because it's created by a distributed community, and it's very difficult to prove the quality. And we do a lot of validation now and validation checks, and have now, let's say, a lot of ideas how to do that. But it's always, let's say, a matter of trust, because a lot of people think because it's open, it's like the general problem of open source. Because you don't have to pay it for it, people think it's of low quality. That's a general problem we face. Another problem that we see now many times is that we try to, let's say, see who's actually users of this data. But as we don't sell this data, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with the data is that this is infrastructure data. The software that is being used for most infrastructure studies and infrastructure things is completely proprietary. The data formats are proprietary. So what we've seen now many times, and we have proof for that OpenStreetMap data has been used to create actually proprietary data that is then used for energy system models, proprietary energy system models and energy system studies or any energy system product. But you can prove that. So we have always the problem that to measure the impact of open data is hard if you cannot sell it because there's no salesman in between. So we have to investigate this, and we see just a lot of people don't give attribution just to OpenStreetMap. Science does it, the rest does actually not. They think like open data is just like for them, almost most for profits we've seen, they don't say it's OpenStreetMap. We ask them if it's OpenStreetMap and they say, yeah, it's OpenStreetMap. Yeah, but we don't. It's super hard for us to investigate it because if you don't know that, the impact, if you cannot get more funding for what we do, that's more or less the problem.
But would it be then, I guess this would not resolve all the problem if you would request all the users to create their accounts or where they are affiliated, if it could be used. But I guess this is very not the way used because, everyone could trick it.
But we don't distribute this data. That's the point. You can download the data actually from our editor. That's another point. It's technically possible. That's no problem. You have it actually on your computer then. But we can see, and it's an interesting thing. Most people who are using our tools, they don't map. They look on the data. That's a huge issue. And let's say it in this way, we cannot also enforce what is actually traffic OpenStreetMap. People just go to the OpenStreetMap server. The data is in the OpenStreetMap server. We don't distribute the data. So how should we know? Yeah. And this is really a challenge for us. I was at the conference now last week at LF Energy Europe. I met three for-profits who told me they use OpenStreetMap. Just people I just get in touch with talking to. I didn't know about this, I just didn't know that those three for-profit companies are using this data for their energy application. And I suspect that the real numbers of users who are using it is significantly higher than we expect and can actually list on our impact page.
But you also briefly mentioned that use of Sentinel-1 and 2, and because they are also freely available. And what were the main challenges of implementing this data?
So we have it in OpenStreetMap, but the resolution is not that good. So sometimes the benefit of it is it's very updated satellite data. So let's say other satellite data, high resolution satellite data we have is sometimes 3-4 years old. Sentinel is, I don't know, technically it's I think 10 days old. You can get 10 days old Sentinel data. That changes the resolution. But it's still good enough to detect that there is something. It is not good enough to map it in this way, but you can use it for solar power. You can use it for solar power detection. Bigger solar parks that you can just detect with Sentinel-2 is being done and proven. With Sentinel-1, you can detect wind turbines. This is done all around the world. There's a global data set done in 2021, I think. And you can, and there's a new development, also detect substations with Sentinel-2. Actually, also with Alpha Earth, this new Google, there's different developments going on that would enable this. you don't have actually any funding to do it. I actually applied for this, and we're looking for partners in Europe to do this, and it would be a huge enabler to know the location of the substations, especially because we think that we can detect distribution substations, so the smaller ones, and to know the location of those are a big enabler for modeling and to estimate energy access in Africa, in Asia. So there is an opportunity, but we just don't have the resources at the moment to do this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are good idea. It's already implemented. It's working. I see your website's nice, and data is being generated, and as you said, people are apparently using industry. They're already using your data. There are more ideas of using more up-to-date techniques and tools, and also freely accessible data. But it all comes down to the support.
It is. Let's say community support is actually even more important than financial support.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like that. So what we really need now is more community members map with us. We train them. We give them all the opportunities, all the tooling. It's a great experience. You can learn a lot from this work. Funding can help also to, let's say, build those tools and to enable, do marketing around it, do mapathons, doing events because on-site events is something what really creates a community at the end. This creates, let's say, connection between people. Then I really like together. That would be something we are looking into. So we are also looking into sponsors for actually mapathons or mapping events like that. That would be, I think, for us very importantly. And yeah, where it's also good is to have funding for validation pipelines. So I think you can invest a significant amount of money and tooling in just to prove the data, to increase the quality. There we still could we could also use financial support, even also community support if people can program. So this is, let's say, what really will be challenging for us now is, I think, to let's say, to get the data more into also utilities, more into usage of different sectors. This is for us something where we also are interested in. So even if you are a user of this data, we help you to use the data. That's an important thing because we want to understand what the requirements of different actors and use of this data. So just contact me and I give you a call, give you an hour, even if you're for profit and want to use the data for a good thing. It should be climate energy access, or if you just want a big, it's let's say it depends also on your use case, but we normally help those people. That's, I would say, will be the challenges for the next year. But I'm very positive. We have a good start.
Yeah, from as a student or PhD student who works at the university, I could see that it could be a great tool also for students to train and also at the same time to make an effort. And if you could collaborate with universities, I guess there would be great support as well. And if there could be also the donation access where people were interested, they could also donate to this platform. I guess that would be great as well in both sides. People who want to support for the open access data, and also for you who are making the effort as well. And Yeah, but for me, I guess this would be a great tool actually to train the students. So for the course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you, let's say, we can train in universities. I come by in person in Europe, can train, let's say, some students in doing that. It's also a big opportunity to learn about the grid. We normally include this. This is how the grid works. This is how it looks like. Actually, the data is the best way to actually explain what the grid is.
Yeah.
You can see it and you can work with it. And yeah, it's this is something we do. We just come by, we train people, we do this for free.
But I mean, sorry to interrupt, but if you collaborate with the institutes, with the schools, and even for high school students, I see that's also why I really wanted to have you in this podcast, because I am inspired. I want to do something about the climate change. I want to make an impact. So, of course, my podcast is a one way to bring into the topics, but I see your initiative. It's really has a direct impact, open science. So, if you could introduce, there are many young generation now. They are very active on, and they are very passionate about open access. They are very passionate about acting on climate change. So if they have the right tools, and I think this is one of them, and they could make a great effort into improving. Of course, you need to check there would be more effort on validating the data.
No, but that's not a problem. Like, we can have beginner workflows, and we have some things that every beginner can map, and he doesn't need to be worried if he doesn't feel strong. We have also neutral control. If you feel uncomfortable because you think you destroy something, do that. With doing, for example, with just placing power towers on OpenStreetMap, you cannot do anything wrong. Then comes someone else with more expertise and connects the power towers with a line. But placing the power towers is sometimes the biggest help you can do. And it's true. And I do also a lot of advocacy around that. Open source and open data is a very actually comfortable climate. Actually, you can do it from home. You can learn from it a lot. Okay, you have no physical community you can connect directly, but there is a lot of communities that you can get also locally. You have local mappers you can meet in person. And the same goes with open source. We even have our own platform called climatetriage.com that we actually run together with GitHub, where we have so-called good first issues in the open source space for developers. And I must say, okay, contributing to open source is a little bit harder. You need a certain programming experience, but contributing to open data is accessible for everyone. And that's why I enjoy it. Open source is, okay, I need to program a little bit. So you need, let's say, also spend some time, and it can be a little bit harder. But climatetriage.com enables that. Yes, it's a great way to contribute to climate relevant projects.
So
yeah.
Briefly, if someone wants to contribute to MapYourGrid, what's the best first step they can take?
You go into our Discord channel and say hello. And then you ask for training. Or, yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah. They will also, for the listeners, you will find the link to the website, and all the sources would be provided as well. And I have some general questions to wrap up this episode, if you don't mind.
No problem. Yeah, that's good.
Looking ahead, what's your biggest hope for how this project will impact the world?
I hope that this project will help us to make a significant amount of growth of the grid possible, find issues in the grid, and enabling energy access for a lot of countries and people. I hope that we can also enable investments in a lot of countries in the right way with this data. I hope that we can support with this data also a whole digital economy around the electrical grid. This is what that is. Yeah.
And do you have advice for people interested in contributing to sustainable solutions?
Contributing, let's say, I think it's very important to always think of the systematic change that is needed for sustainability and not your carbon footprint in the first place. Your carbon footprint is relevant, but the most important thing is really to have a systematic change and to ask yourself, what is the systematic change I can contribute to? Because, if we cannot all, even if we all would be, let's say, have 20, 30% less carbon footprint or 40%, it would be not, as long as you don't change the systematic problem behind it, then it would just take longer for climate change to come. And the systematic change is also that the numbers of climate change, our environment, the destruction, and the value also of our environment is not being reflected into our prices and the numbers and our capitalism and let's say I'm not, completely against money, or I'm not, completely against capitalism, but we need to add the natural capitalism to our capitalistic system to value water, air in our prices is the main systematic change that I think needs to be done. And to create the good numbers for these prices, you need open source software and data. Yeah.
True. And again, thank you for your work. As you said, you've highlighted the challenges, and I really hope that this kind of initiatives gets more support. And for me personally, talking with a lot of people, I bring into the audience more people who are advocates for open knowledge, open science, and accessibility, shared knowledge, practical knowledge. So you are one of them who is really doing the work that needs to be done. And I guess after this episode, some supporters will reach out to you, I hope.
I also hope so. Yeah. Thank you so much, Naz. It was really great opportunity to speak here and really, really interesting, giving me all the space and time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.